So I started my transition in the early 2000s, and at that time there was no people in the public eye that identified as trans people. People weren't even called transgender at that time. People were called transsexuals, and the only kind of examples of people in society that were trans people were people that were sex workers or negative portrayals of people in television and media. So when I started my transition, there wasn't really any kind of supports or networks around me at the time in regards to other trans people. And so I started that journey quite scared, and I remember speaking to people about it, and people were really concerned for my safety and my well-being at that time in the early 2000s to do that. But I chose to do it because I wanted to live my life as my authentic self. And part of that was to do what I need to do to start my transition and live how I wanted to live. And so when I was 21, I moved to London. And the reason I moved there is because I had a dual passport. I've got a British passport, and I knew that the healthcare system in the UK was supportive of trans people undergoing gender-affirming surgeries, whereas Australia isn't like that at all. So I went to the UK and I got surgery through the NHS done for free, which is very lucky for me in that regard to be able to be approved of that. But it was a very lengthy process, a lot of psychological assessments and testing, and quite brutal to go through just to do what I needed to do to undergo the surgery that I wanted to have done. And it was so important to me because I wasn't comfortable in my body with the way it was. I didn't feel comfortable with other people intimately in that regard. So having that surgery done was life-changing for me, and something that I really needed to do and really wanted to do. And then I came back to Australia as my authentic self and rocked up to my brother's wedding after going via Thailand and having breast surgery done there on the way home. And saving in the UK, I think it was like £1,300 at the time to get my breasts done in Thailand. And I remember I was working 2 jobs and I wasn't really eating properly because I wanted to just make sure I had the money to do that. But it was really important for me to kind of finalise my transition in that way. And then come back to Australia and introduce myself fully as myself to my family and to my friends back here in Australia. And that's kind of how I landed. Yeah, 22 years ago that all started.
Wow. Yeah. So what does it mean to have an organisation like this support the shortfalls of the Australian government?
I think it's really important because everything to do with a medical and a physical transition is expensive. There's no part of transitioning that is cheap. I was very blessed to be able to go and do it overseas and to kind of do it on the cheap in a way. I like to refer to myself as the bargain shop trans Barbie. You know, I've done it the cheap way around. But I think in regards to support within Australia, having an organisation like this where young trans people have other people with lived experiences supporting them to go through what they need to go through, and to not have the stress of having to do a GoFundMe or to find means of navigating to get funds in ways that might not be really comfortable for them to do. I think it's really important because there isn't a lot of support in the Australian government when it comes to gender affirming care.